An old woman left her house to a homeless veteran and his dog. Then the miracle began. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get started with our story. A night in the small town of Pinewood had been uneventful until the wind picked up, howling like a restless ghost through the streets. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and pine, as rain pelted against the windows of the old houses lining the road. Jack, a former soldier in his 40s, trudged along the flooded street, his shoulders hunched under the weight of his weathered coat, his boots sinking into the muddy ground with every step. His only companion, Buddy, a loyal German shepherd, walked silently beside him, his sharp amber eyes scanning the surroundings with an alertness that matched Jack's. Jack had been drifting for months, unable to settle anywhere since leaving the military. The wounds of war had followed him home, not just in his body, but in his soul. The weight of what he had lost, his comrades, his sense of purpose, hung heavily on him. But Buddy had always been there, a constant presence, a friend in a world that felt increasingly lonely. Tonight, as the storm raged, they were both searching for shelter, anything to take them away from the cold and the rain. As they walked, Jack spotted a small light through the mist, a glow faintly flickering from an old bakery at the end of the street. The sign, worn and cracked, read Sugar Pine Bakery. Jack muttered to Buddy, "If we're lucky, we might get some coffee." But as they approached the bakery, something caught Buddy's attention. The dog's ears perked up, and his body tensed, signaling that something was wrong. Jack instinctively followed Buddy's gaze, and that's when he saw her, an elderly woman standing on the porch, struggling against the storm. She was small, fragile, but determined to close the shutters of the bakery, trying to protect it from the fierce wind. Then, with a sudden crack, a massive pine tree by the curb, struck by lightning, began to fall. Jack's heart raced as he watched the tree come crashing down, aiming straight for the porch where the woman stood. Without thinking, he sprinted toward her, shouting, "Move!" Buddy was already ahead of him, barking urgently as they both reached the porch in a blur of motion. Jack dove into the debris, pushing the heavy beam off the woman with a strength he didn't know he had left. The woman, dazed but alive, was gently pulled into the safety of the bakery. She was trembling, but there was a faint smile on her face as she looked up at Jack and Buddy. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaky. "You saved me." Jack nodded, out of breath but trying to stay calm. "It was nothing," he replied, his voice soft but steady. "Just glad I got to you in time." The storm outside began to calm, but the warmth of the bakery was a welcome relief. The woman, who introduced herself as Maeve Halloway, insisted they stay for a while. "You must be tired," she said, her eyes softening. "Let me make you some tea." Jack hesitated, unsure if he was worthy of her kindness, but Buddy had already settled by the fire, and Jack knew it was a good idea to rest for a bit. As Maeve busied herself with the tea, Jack couldn't help but notice the old photographs on the walls of the bakery, a visual history of a life well lived. Maeve sat down beside him after a while, her eyes watching the fire as she spoke about her life. "This place," she said, her voice thick with nostalgia, "has been my home for decades. My husband built it, and now it's just me, keeping it alive." Jack listened, his heart heavy with the weight of his own losses. He knew what it felt like to lose everything, to have the life you knew slip through your fingers. But as he sat there, listening to Maeve's story, something inside him stirred, an unfamiliar sense of hope. Little did he know, this night, this storm, and this old woman would change everything for him. The miracle was only just beginning. I'm sure you've heard it before, that sometimes life has a way of leading us down strange and unexpected paths. For Jack and Buddy, it had been a series of misfortunes, but now, as they sat in the warmth of Maeve's bakery, something felt different. The flicker of the candlelight, the smell of cinnamon and fresh bread, the soft hum of the wind outside. It was like a quiet promise that change was coming. As the storm outside began to fade, the stillness inside the bakery wrapped around them like a blanket. Maeve had made them tea, and the three of them sat in comfortable silence, listening to the rhythmic crackle of the fire. Buddy had curled up on a worn rug near the oven, his eyes occasionally flicking up to Jack as if checking in on him. Jack sipped his tea slowly, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. He wasn't used to this, being cared for, being offered something without having to fight for it. Maeve broke the silence first. "You know, I've been thinking," she said, her voice soft but steady. "This place, it's been here for so long, and now it feels empty." Jack looked at her, sensing the weight behind her words. "Empty?" he asked, his brow furrowed. Maeve nodded, a wistful smile tugging at her lips. "I've had this bakery for over 40 years. My husband and I built it from the ground up. But he's gone now. And now, it's just me. The town's changed, people don't come by like they used to. I'm not getting any younger, and this place, it's too much for just one person." Jack felt a pang of sympathy. He knew what it was like to feel like you were carrying the weight of the world alone. "You've kept it alive for so long," he said quietly. "That's something." Maeve smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, but for how much longer?" She sighed, her gaze turning toward the window where the storm had finally passed, leaving behind a sky as gray as the pavement. "I don't know if I can keep it up. The roof's leaking, the ovens are old, and I'm just tired, Jack. So tired." Jack opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, Maeve continued. "I've been thinking about who I could leave it to, who would take care of it the way it needs to be cared for. But I haven't found anyone. Not until tonight." Jack blinked in surprise. "What do you mean?" Maeve met his gaze, her eyes filled with an intensity that caught him off guard. "I mean, I think you and your dog are the answer. You've helped me tonight. You didn't ask for anything in return. And you deserve something good, Jack. Something more than the life you've had." Jack stared at her, unsure of what to say. He had never expected anything from anyone, let alone an old woman he had just met. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. Maeve smiled softly, her eyes twinkling with something Jack couldn't quite place. "You don't have to say anything yet, but I want you to think about it. This bakery, this place, it's not just about bread. It's about memories and love and community. It's about a legacy that needs to be passed on." Jack's heart tightened in his chest. He didn't know if he was ready to take on something so big, something that required more than he thought he had to give. But then, he looked at Buddy, who was now resting his head on Jack's boots, eyes half closed in contentment. Buddy had always been there for him, just like Maeve had been there tonight. Maybe it was time for him to give something back. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "But I don't know if I'm the right person for this." Maeve placed a hand on his arm, her touch surprisingly strong for someone so frail. "I think you are," she said quietly. "You just don't know it yet." For the rest of the evening, they talked, sharing stories and quiet moments by the fire. As the clock ticked on, Jack felt a shift inside him. A door that had been closed for so long was slowly creaking open. He didn't know where this new path would lead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt the faintest glimmer of hope. When the fire finally died down, Maeve handed Jack a set of old, brass keys. "If you decide to stay, they'll unlock everything you need," she said. Jack took them without a word. They were heavier than he expected, but for some reason, they felt right in his hand. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. "I know you must be wondering what happens next in this incredible journey." After Maeve handed Jack the keys to the bakery, he spent the next few days trying to make sense of the decision that lay before him. The storm had passed, and so had the weight of the doubts he had been carrying for so long. The bakery was quiet now, but it wasn't empty. It felt different, as if the old walls had been waiting for someone like him to walk through its doors. Jack had lived in chaos for so long. His life had been a series of fleeting moments, always moving, always trying to outrun his past. But now, for the first time, he stood still. Buddy, ever loyal, was by his side, watching him with knowing eyes. The next morning, Jack took a walk around the bakery, feeling the cool morning air brush against his face. He wasn't sure if he was ready to take on this new life, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that this place, this bakery, had a role for him. He stood by the front window, gazing out at the town. It wasn't much, a few blocks of old buildings, but there was something comforting about the simplicity of it all. There was history here. Jack had spent years running from his own history, but now, he wondered if it was time to face it. It was time to make a decision. With the keys still heavy in his pocket, Jack returned to the bakery, where he found Maeve sitting at the counter, sipping her tea. She didn't ask him for an answer, not yet, but her gaze was steady, waiting for him to figure it out on his own. "It's not just about running a bakery, you know," Maeve said quietly, breaking the silence between them. "It's about keeping something alive. The people who come through those doors, the ones who rely on this place. Sometimes it's not just about the bread. It's about the memories we're creating. It's about the hope we're offering. This bakery has been a place of refuge for many. It's not just a business, Jack. It's a lifeline." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle deep in his chest. He had always felt like an outsider, someone who didn't belong, but maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to finally be part of something bigger than himself. "I don't know if I can do it," Jack said, his voice low. "I've never run anything like this before." Maeve smiled warmly, her eyes kind. "You don't have to do it alone, Jack. You've got Buddy, and you've got me. We can do it together." Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him. He wasn't sure how it would work, or what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone anymore. Over the next few days, Jack began to settle into his new life. He spent his mornings helping Maeve with the bakery, learning the rhythm of the kitchen, the kneading of the dough, the careful attention to the ovens, the art of making the perfect loaf of bread. It wasn't easy, and there were days when he felt completely out of his element. But with every loaf of bread he pulled from the oven, with every cup of coffee he served to a regular customer, he felt a little more at home. Buddy, ever watchful, became a familiar sight to the customers, who would often stop to pet him and greet Jack. The town, though small, had a sense of community that Jack hadn't known in years. People were kind, and they appreciated the simple things. They appreciated the bakery. One afternoon, as Jack was sweeping the floor after the lunch rush, he heard a soft knock at the door. It was a man, probably in his late 50s, with a weathered face and kind eyes. He introduced himself as Henry, a local who had lived in Pinewood all his life. "I heard the bakery's under new management," Henry said, his voice gravelly but warm. "I've been coming here for years. Your bread is already better than Maeve's husband's." Jack chuckled, wiping his hands on his apron. "Maeve always said he was the one who had the magic touch," he said. "But I'm learning." Henry smiled, sitting down at one of the tables near the window. "Well, you're doing something right," he said. "I'll tell you what. I don't know what's been going on in this town lately, but there's been a shift. People are starting to notice again. That's why I'm here." Jack raised an eyebrow, curious. "What do you mean?" Henry leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly. "There's been talk. People are remembering what this place meant to them. Maeve and her husband, they were a part of the community. They were family. And now, you're here. You've got a chance to make this place what it was meant to be. A home for all of us. But you've got to stick with it. You've got to believe in it, just like Maeve did." Jack felt the weight of Henry's words. The responsibility, the legacy, it was more than just the bakery. It was about the people. It was about the future. And for the first time in a long time, Jack realized he wanted to be a part of it. That evening, as he closed up the bakery and prepared to head home, Jack stood by the window, watching the last light of day fade into the horizon. Buddy sat at his feet, looking up at him with those wise eyes. Jack smiled softly, running a hand through the dog's fur. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing. This was his chance to build something, to be someone. And for the first time in years, he wasn't running anymore. "I know it feels like everything is changing, and it is." Jack had settled into his routine at the bakery, but the weight of responsibility still pressed on his shoulders. Every morning, he woke up early to bake, kneading the dough with a rhythm that had become second nature to him. But there was something more now, something different in the air, something he couldn't quite place. It wasn't just the smell of fresh bread or the sound of Buddy's tail thumping against the floor as he lay by the door. It was the town. Pinewood had been changing, and Jack felt that shift deep in his bones. As the days passed, more people came through the bakery doors. They were regulars, some Jack recognized, others he didn't. They came for the bread, sure, but something else was drawing them in. It was the warmth of the place, the quiet sense of belonging that Jack and Maeve had somehow managed to create together. The old bakery, which had been a place of solitude for Maeve in her later years, was now alive again with laughter, conversation, and the smell of rising dough. Jack began to notice the subtle changes, the smiles that came easier, the greetings that felt more genuine, the way people lingered in the bakery long after they had finished their coffee. It was as if the town itself had decided to give the bakery and Jack a second chance. One afternoon, as Jack wiped down the counter, a young woman walked in, holding a baby in her arms. Jack looked up and smiled, recognizing her as Mary, a single mother who lived down the street. She had been coming in regularly for bread since Jack took over the bakery. She smiled warmly at him, but her eyes were tired, as if carrying the weight of more than just the baby. "Hey there, Jack," she said softly, walking up to the counter. "I just wanted to thank you again for the bread. You don't know how much it means to me." Jack smiled, his heart swelling a little at her words. "Of course, Mary. I'm just glad you like it." But Mary shook her head, her gaze growing distant. "No, you don't understand. I've been coming here for years, and before, I always felt alone. But now it's different. It's like this place is part of something bigger. It's like it's giving me hope again. And for my daughter too." Jack felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. He had no idea that something as simple as baking bread could make such a difference in someone's life. But he was starting to see it now. People were finding something here, something that wasn't just about food. It was about connection, about healing, about building something together. Mary left with a warm loaf of bread tucked under her arm, her daughter cooing happily in the stroller. Jack watched her go, feeling a sense of purpose that he hadn't known he was missing. That night, after closing the bakery, Jack sat down in the back room, Buddy curled up at his feet. The weight of the keys in his pocket reminded him of what Maeve had said about the bakery, about the legacy it carried. And he realized, for the first time, that he was a part of that legacy now. It wasn't just Maeve's bakery anymore. It was his too. He stood up, walking over to the window where he could see the town spread out before him, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights. Pinewood wasn't much, but it was home. And for the first time in a long time, Jack didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like he belonged. As the days passed, Jack and Maeve worked side by side, making sure the bakery stayed afloat. Jack learned the ins and outs of running the place, handling the day-to-day operations while Maeve helped him with the recipes and the little touches that made the bakery so special. It wasn't easy, and there were days when Jack felt overwhelmed, when the pressure of running the business felt too much. But then he'd remember Mary's words, and the way the bakery had brought people together, and he'd push forward. One evening, after the bakery had closed and the last of the customers had gone home, Maeve turned to Jack. She had a smile on her face, but it was tinged with something else, something that Jack couldn't quite place. "You know," she said, her voice soft, "I never thought I'd see the day when someone would take over this place. But I'm glad it's you, Jack. I've seen the way people look at you, the way they trust you, and I think you're going to do something really special here." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He didn't know what to say. Maeve had always been the backbone of the bakery, and to have her place that kind of faith in him meant more than words could express. "Thank you, Maeve," he said quietly. "I'm just trying to do my best." She reached over, patting him on the shoulder. "Your best is more than enough." The next morning, Jack woke up to find a letter waiting for him at the bakery. It was from the town council. He opened it, his heart racing, and as he read the contents, he realized what it meant. The town had decided to officially name the bakery as a historic landmark, a symbol of Pinewood's resilience and community spirit. Jack couldn't believe it. The bakery was more than just a place to buy bread now. It was a part of the town's history, a place where people came together, shared stories, and found solace. And for the first time in a long while, Jack realized that he wasn't just keeping the bakery alive. He was part of something that would live on long after he was gone. I know the road ahead of Jack wasn't going to be easy. He had come a long way from the man who had stumbled into the bakery that stormy night. But now, there was a new kind of weight on his shoulders. The bakery was thriving, and Pinewood had begun to embrace the change Jack had brought. But the responsibility of it all, the community, the legacy, the hope, it was a lot for one man to carry. Yet, Jack was no stranger to carrying burdens. He had carried them all his life. What he didn't expect was how the town would start to depend on him. The bakery had become the heart of Pinewood, and with that heart came the chance to heal, to rebuild. It was a cold morning when Jack first noticed the old man standing outside the bakery. His clothes were ragged, his face lined with age and hardship, and yet there was something in his posture that suggested resilience. Jack had seen many people walk into the bakery, but this man was different. He seemed to be waiting for something. Jack hesitated for a moment before walking over and greeting him. "Morning, sir," Jack said. "Can I help you?" The man looked up, his eyes meeting Jack's with a weary but steady gaze. "I've heard about you," the old man said quietly. "You're the one who saved the bakery, brought it back to life." Jack was taken aback. He didn't know who this man was, but the recognition in his eyes made Jack feel like he had done something important. "Well, it wasn't just me," Jack replied modestly. "Maeve helped a lot, and the town's been great." The old man nodded. "The town has been good to me too," he said, his voice rough but grateful. "I've been living here for many years, but I've never really felt like I belonged. Not like you do. You've changed this place." Jack smiled faintly, unsure of how to respond. "I'm just trying to do what's right," he said. "But it's more than that, isn't it?" the man said, his gaze shifting to the bakery behind Jack. "This place is where people find comfort. It's where they come when they're lost. And you've made it a home again." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He didn't realize how much the bakery had come to mean to the town until that moment. He had always seen it as a way to start fresh, to find something of his own, but it had become so much more than that. It was a place where people could rediscover hope. The man's words lingered with Jack as he turned and went inside to open the bakery. That morning, as the warm light filled the space and the first customers began to trickle in, Jack felt something shift within him. He wasn't just running a business anymore. He was part of the town's story, part of its heartbeat. The weeks that followed brought more growth, not just for the bakery, but for Jack. He started to feel a deep sense of belonging, a connection to the community that he hadn't known in years. Every day, he saw the faces of regulars, all of them coming in for their bread, their coffee, and a moment of connection. The town was slowly coming back to life, and Jack could feel the pulse of it. He wasn't just helping people with bread. He was helping them heal, helping them find a place where they could belong. One afternoon, Maeve stopped by to check on Jack, as she did from time to time. She had been giving him space to figure things out on his own, but Jack knew she was always there when he needed her. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her eyes soft but knowing. Jack wiped his hands on his apron and looked up. "I'm doing all right. A lot of work, but I think I'm finally starting to feel like I'm part of something." Maeve smiled. "You've done more than just work, Jack. You've brought this town together. You've given them something to believe in." Jack wasn't sure if he deserved such praise, but he felt the truth in her words. This bakery had become more than just a place to work. It was a lifeline, a symbol of what could happen when people came together. That evening, as Jack was closing up, he heard the faint sound of the bell ringing above the bakery door. He turned, expecting to see one of the regulars, but when he looked up, he saw the old man from earlier. He was standing in the doorway, a small smile on his face. "I've been thinking," the old man said, his voice quieter now. "You've made a difference here, and I think I can help you with something." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Help me with something?" The old man nodded, stepping inside. "I've been living alone for years. My wife passed away a long time ago, and I don't have much left. But I've got a piece of land up on the hill. It's not much, but it's mine, and I think it could help you." Jack felt a flutter of confusion in his chest. "I don't understand," he said, looking at the man with curiosity. "It's not much," the man repeated, "but I want you to have it. I want you to have something that's yours. You've given so much to this town, and I think it's time someone gave something to you." Jack was speechless, the weight of the old man's words sinking in. He didn't know what to say. All he had ever known was struggle, and now here was someone offering him something without asking for anything in return. The man placed a piece of paper in Jack's hand. "It's the deed to the land. It's yours." Jack looked at the paper, his hands trembling. He had never expected anything like this. And yet, here it was, an opportunity, a chance to build something lasting. As the old man turned to leave, Jack called out to him. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to repay you for this." The man turned with a faint smile. "You don't have to repay me. Just take care of it. Take care of this town. That's all I ask." Jack watched him walk away, the weight of the deed in his hands, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a future that was his to shape. I know that sometimes, when you least expect it, life hands you an opportunity to change everything. That's exactly what Jack felt as he stood there, holding the deed to the land the old man had left him. He couldn't believe what had just happened. The land, his to keep, his to cultivate, was a gift that seemed too good to be true. It was like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, but at the same time, something new had been placed upon them. It was his responsibility now, not just the bakery, but this piece of land, this new future. It was no longer about just getting by. It was about building something lasting. Jack spent the next few days in a haze, walking around the bakery, talking to Maeve, trying to figure out what this all meant. He didn't know the first thing about farming or owning land, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was a chance he couldn't ignore. He had lived through so much already, and now he had a chance to make something real, something that could last. That morning, as the sun filtered through the bakery's front windows, Jack made a decision. He was going to visit the land. He had to see it for himself, to know what he was working with before he made any plans. He grabbed Buddy's leash and headed out, the dog trotting by his side, tail wagging with excitement. It didn't take long to reach the property. It was just on the outskirts of town, not far from where the hills met the forest. Jack stood at the edge of the land, looking out over the rolling fields and the small grove of trees that bordered it. It wasn't much, at least not yet. The land was overgrown with weeds, and the soil was dry, cracked in some places. But there was something in the air here, something that felt peaceful and full of promise. He could see it. He could see what this place could become. For the first time in years, Jack felt a spark of hope. He wasn't sure how he was going to do it, but he was going to try. The thought of working this land, of planting something and watching it grow, felt right. It felt like the next step in a journey he had started all those months ago, when he had walked into the bakery for the first time, lost and alone. Now, with Buddy by his side, he was ready to take on this new challenge. Over the next few weeks, Jack threw himself into the work. Every morning, he would bake the bread, greet the customers, and then spend the rest of the day at the land, clearing weeds, tilling the soil, and planting seeds. It was hard work, but Jack didn't mind. It was the kind of work that made him feel like he was building something, that he was finally creating something that would outlast him. Maeve often came by, offering advice and help. She was an old hand at running the bakery, but when it came to farming, she was just as clueless as Jack. Still, they managed, and little by little, the land began to transform. The weeds started to thin out, the soil began to soften, and small plants began to sprout. It wasn't much yet, but it was a start. And that was all Jack needed, a start. One afternoon, as Jack was working the land, a familiar face appeared at the edge of the field. It was Mary, the young woman with the baby who had come into the bakery a few weeks earlier. She was carrying a small basket of freshly picked herbs, and her face lit up when she saw Jack. "Hey there," she said, walking toward him. "I thought I'd bring you these. I know you've been working so hard, and I thought you might like some fresh herbs to add to your cooking." Jack smiled, grateful for her kindness. "Thank you, Mary," he said, taking the basket from her. "That's very thoughtful." Mary stood with him for a moment, watching as he wiped his brow and looked out over the field. "You've really been working hard," she said, her voice soft. "It's amazing what you're doing here. I can already see it. This place is going to be something special." Jack looked at her, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I'm trying," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm trying." Mary smiled and placed a hand on his arm. "You're doing great," she said. "You've already made such a difference to this town. I think you're going to do amazing things here." Jack watched her leave, the words she had said echoing in his mind. He wasn't sure if he was ready to believe in himself just yet, but hearing those words made him feel like he might actually have a chance at this. The land, the bakery, the town, it was all starting to come together. And for the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he had a purpose. He had a reason to keep going. That night, after the bakery closed, Jack stood in the front window, looking out at the town. The streetlights cast a soft glow on the road, and he could hear the distant hum of life all around him. Pinewood was a small town, but it was his town now, and he was ready to build something here. Jack didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. He had come a long way from the lost man who had stumbled into the bakery all those months ago. Now, he had a home, a community, and a future that was his to shape. I know that when you least expect it, life has a way of throwing you unexpected curveballs. Jack had been through so much already, and as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the small piece of land he had inherited from the old man began to show signs of promise. The once barren field was now full of life. Grass grew thicker, the soil was richer, and the small garden Jack had planted in the corner was starting to bloom. It was hard work. But Jack had learned something over the years. If you want to build something worth having, you have to put in the effort. Maeve had always told him that. As he stood there, looking out over the land with Buddy by his side, he felt a deep sense of pride. This land, once abandoned and forgotten, was becoming his. It wasn't just a piece of property. It was a symbol of everything he had fought for. Jack had come a long way from the lost man he once was, and now he had something to show for it. A future that he was building with his own hands. That morning, as he walked through the field, Jack noticed something odd in the distance. At first, he thought it was just the wind moving through the trees, but then he saw it again. A figure, walking along the edge of the forest, moving slowly but with purpose. It wasn't someone Jack recognized, but the figure was familiar somehow, like a shadow from the past. He felt a chill run down his spine. "Buddy, stay," Jack muttered to his dog, who instinctively sat down beside him. Jack began to walk toward the figure, his heart pounding in his chest. As he got closer, he saw that it was an older man, dressed in tattered clothes and carrying a large bag slung over his shoulder. His face was weathered, his hair long and graying, and his eyes seemed distant, lost. When the man saw Jack approaching, he stopped, standing still as if unsure of what to do next. Jack slowed his pace, trying to gauge the situation. There was something about this man, something that made Jack feel uneasy, but also strangely familiar. "Can I help you?" Jack called out, his voice steady. The man looked at him for a long moment, as if unsure of the words to say. Finally, he spoke, his voice gravelly and thick with age. "I've been walking for miles," the man said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I heard about this place. I heard about you." Jack felt his brow furrow. "You heard about me?" The old man nodded, his eyes shifting nervously as he glanced over his shoulder. "Yes," he said quietly. "I've heard a lot of things. About the bakery, about the land, about the man who's bringing this town back to life." Jack felt a sense of unease settle over him. "What do you want?" The old man hesitated, his eyes darting around before he met Jack's gaze. "I've been running," he said, his voice cracking. "Running from my past. I came here because I heard this place could give me a second chance. I heard you were offering people like me a way to start over." Jack's mind raced. He didn't know what this man meant by people like me, but something about his words rang true. He had given people a second chance. He had given himself a second chance. And now, it seemed, this man was asking for the same. "I'm not sure what I can offer you," Jack said, his voice softening. "This place is still a work in progress. I'm not a charity, and I can't promise anything." The old man's eyes dropped to the ground. "I don't want charity," he said, almost as if ashamed. "I just need a place to stay, a place to rest. I've lost everything, and I don't know where else to go." Jack looked at the man, seeing the weariness in his posture, the exhaustion that seemed to hang over him like a cloud. For a moment, Jack didn't know what to say. He had been there before, lost, with nowhere to turn. He remembered how it felt when he first came to Pinewood, with nothing but Buddy and the hope that things could get better. "You can stay here for a while," Jack said finally, his voice steady. "But you'll have to help with the work. If you want to stay, you have to work. This place, this land, this bakery, it's not about just taking. You have to give something back." The old man looked up at him, his eyes wide with gratitude. "I'll work," he said, his voice full of relief. "I'll do whatever it takes." Jack nodded. "All right," he said. "Come with me. I'll show you where you can stay." As the two men walked back toward the bakery, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose settle in his chest. He had given the man a chance, just as others had given him a chance. It wasn't about charity, it was about building something together. And for the first time, Jack realized that this was the true meaning of home. It wasn't about the land or the bakery. It was about the people who worked together to make it all happen. It was about finding a place where you could belong, no matter how broken you might be. That night, as Jack and the old man sat by the fire in the small room behind the bakery, Jack thought about everything that had happened. The bakery, the land, the people, everything had come together in a way he never expected. And for the first time in his life, Jack felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. I know that life has a funny way of working itself out, but what Jack was beginning to understand was that it wasn't just fate. It wasn't just about things falling into place on their own. It was about the work, the effort, the choices you make every single day. Over the next few months, the bakery continued to thrive. Jack had found a rhythm, balancing the work at the bakery with the new life he was building on the land. Every morning, he baked bread, served coffee, and greeted customers. Every afternoon, he went to the field, planting, clearing, and slowly turning the land into something he could be proud of. The community was becoming more than just a place where Jack lived. It was where he belonged. And just like that, Jack began to feel something he hadn't in years, a sense of peace. But not everything was easy. The old man who had come to him for help, whose name was Sam, had settled in and started working alongside Jack. Sam had been a blessing in many ways, offering a steady hand and a willing spirit. Yet, there was something else that was becoming clear to Jack, something about Sam's past that didn't quite sit right. It wasn't anything Sam said directly, but the way he sometimes looked off into the distance, the way he seemed to carry a weight Jack couldn't fully understand. Still, Jack didn't press him. He knew what it was like to have a past that you couldn't shake. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Jack and Sam sat on the porch of the bakery, watching the town wind down. The soft hum of the evening breeze mingled with the distant sound of crickets, and Buddy lay by their feet, content. "I never thought I'd end up here," Sam said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost as if he were speaking to himself. Jack looked over at him, waiting for him to continue. "I've been through a lot, Jack," Sam went on. "A lot of things I'd rather forget. But this place, it's different. I think it's the first time in a long while that I've felt like maybe I can make a life again." Jack nodded, understanding more than Sam knew. "You've worked hard, and you've earned your place here," Jack said quietly. Sam let out a slow, deep breath, his eyes shifting toward the horizon. "I don't know if I'll ever shake what's in my past, but I'm trying," Sam admitted. Jack didn't respond right away. He didn't need to. Sam's honesty, the vulnerability in his words, meant more than any reassurances Jack could give. Instead, Jack just clapped him on the back, a silent acknowledgement of their shared understanding. The next morning, as Jack worked on the land, he felt a pull in his chest, a strange sensation that something was about to change. He had no idea what it was, but the air felt different, charged, almost, as if the universe was holding its breath. That evening, Maeve came by, as she often did, to check on Jack and Sam, bringing a fresh batch of her famous pies to share. The bakery had become more than just a business. It had become a place for the community to come together. Maeve was like a grandmother to everyone who walked through the doors, offering wisdom, warmth, and, of course, food. As they sat down to eat, Maeve looked at Jack with a knowing smile. "You've done good work here, Jack. The town is better for it," she said, her voice rich with pride. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unsure of how to respond. "It's not just me," he said, glancing at Sam, who was enjoying one of Maeve's pies. "It's all of us." Maeve raised an eyebrow. "Of course," she said, a twinkle in her eye. "But sometimes, it takes someone to get the ball rolling. And you've done that. You've brought this town back to life." Jack smiled, but there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. The town had changed, yes, but so had he. And the land was starting to feel like it was calling to him, urging him to build something more, something lasting. That night, after Maeve left, Jack stood in front of the bakery, looking out at the stars above. The sky was clear, the constellations bright against the velvet black. The land, the bakery, the people, it was all beginning to make sense. This was his purpose, his place. And maybe, just maybe, he could turn it into something bigger, something that could change lives. As the days passed, Jack worked tirelessly, building a small greenhouse, expanding the garden, and even planting fruit trees. The small patch of land, once forgotten, was now becoming something of value. It was more than just work, it was a dream being realized. One afternoon, as Jack and Sam were working in the garden, a car pulled up to the bakery. Jack recognized the driver immediately. It was Henry, the local who had first welcomed him to town. Jack waved and walked toward the car. "Hey there, Henry," Jack said with a smile. "What brings you by?" Henry smiled back, but there was a serious look in his eyes. "I've been talking to the town council," he said, "and we've decided that Pinewood needs a park. A community space where people can gather, a place for the kids to play, the families to come together. And we want that park to be right here, next to the bakery. We want you to help make it happen, Jack." Jack's heart skipped a beat. A park. It wasn't just a place to work and live anymore. It was a place for the community, a place for the future. I don't know what to say, Jack said, his voice thick. With emotion, Henry smiled. You don't have to say anything yet. We're all in this together. But we need someone to lead the charge, someone who believes in Pinewood. Jack looked at Sam, who was smiling from ear to ear. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. The future was here, and he was ready to help shape it. I know it's strange to think that one small decision, one moment of change, can ripple out and transform an entire community. But for Jack, that's exactly what had been happening since he first decided to take over the bakery, since he first started working the land. The town of Pinewood was beginning to thrive again, and Jack was at the heart of it all. But as with any great journey, the next steps weren't always clear. Jack had agreed to help make the park a reality, but it was more than just a project. It was a symbol of everything the town had been through and everything it was becoming. The idea of a park was simple enough, but the work to bring it to life was going to be anything but easy. It meant coordinating with the town council, managing funds, getting volunteers, and overseeing every detail from start to finish. Jack wasn't sure if he was ready for all of that responsibility, but he knew he couldn't turn back now. Maeve, Sam, and the people of Pinewood had all put their trust in him. They had given him a second chance, and now it was time for him to return the favor. As he sat at the small table in the bakery one morning, going over the plans for the park, he felt a weight on his shoulders. Buddy lay beside him, as usual, his head resting on Jack's boots. It was early, before the first customers came in, and the bakery was quiet, almost too quiet. It was in these moments that Jack did his best thinking. I can't do this alone, Jack muttered to himself, more to Buddy than anyone else. I need help. It was then that he had an idea. The town had always been a close-knit community. He wasn't alone in this, and he didn't have to do everything by himself. Jack decided to take action. He reached out to Mary, the young woman who had brought herbs to him a while back, and to Henry, the local who had suggested the park in the first place. Within a few days, word had spread through Pinewood that they were starting a community project. The response was overwhelming. People were eager to help, and as the days passed, Jack found himself leading a team of volunteers who were just as passionate about Pinewood's future as he was. Together, they cleared the land for the park, planting trees and flowers, building paths, and designing a space that would bring people together. Jack was amazed by the sense of camaraderie that surrounded him. There was something about the collective effort that made him feel more connected to the town than ever before. He wasn't just building a park. He was helping to build a future. But even as Jack worked tirelessly with the others, there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. The weight of the bakery, the park, and everything else he was managing seemed to be growing heavier by the day. He hadn't forgotten the old man's words, the promise of a fresh start. But in the midst of all the progress, Jack couldn't help but wonder if he was on the right path. One afternoon, as he was overseeing the construction of a new bench for the park, Sam approached him, his hands covered in dirt and his face tired. You all right, Jack? Sam asked, his tone gentle. Jack paused, glancing at Sam. He had been working alongside Jack on the park, just like everyone else, but something in his eyes told Jack that Sam saw something more. I don't know, Sam, Jack admitted, wiping his brow. I'm trying to do so much. I feel like it's all coming at me so fast. Sam nodded, understanding in his eyes. I get it, he said quietly. But you're doing something good here. For the town. For yourself. For everyone. Jack looked down at the ground, trying to process Sam's words. I never thought I'd be in this position, Jack said, his voice low. I never thought I'd be the one people came to for help. I was the one who needed help. I still feel like I don't belong here. Sam placed a hand on his shoulder. You belong here more than anyone. You've earned it. But that doesn't mean you have to do it alone. Jack looked up at Sam, surprised by the depth of his words. He had spent so much time feeling like an outsider, like he didn't deserve the opportunities that had come his way. But Sam was right. He didn't have to carry all of this weight alone. It wasn't just his burden to bear. Over the next few weeks, Jack continued to work on the park, and as the days passed, he felt the pressure slowly ease. The people of Pinewood had come together, and the park was beginning to take shape. It wasn't just a project anymore. It was a symbol of what they could achieve when they worked together. And for the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he was part of something that was bigger than himself. One evening, after a long day of work, Jack sat outside the bakery, watching the sun set behind the hills. Buddy sat beside him, his head resting on Jack's knee. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the world felt still. It was then that Jack realized something he hadn't before. He had found his place. He had found his purpose. And it wasn't just in the bakery or the park or the land. It was in the people. The community had become his family, and he was no longer alone. He was home. I know that when you start to believe in something, really believe in it, the world seems to fall into place in ways you can't predict. Jack had spent months working hard, building a life he never thought possible, and now, standing at the edge of the park he and the town had built together, he realized just how far he'd come. The park was almost done. The benches were in place, the paths were lined with flowers, and the trees had begun to bloom. People were already using it, sitting, talking, laughing, and spending time together. It wasn't just a park anymore. It was a gathering place, a symbol of hope and community, and Jack had been a part of making that happen. But even as he stood there, feeling a sense of accomplishment, there was still something stirring inside him, something that he couldn't quite shake. The weight of the future seemed heavier than ever. The bakery was doing well, but Jack knew that it wasn't just about keeping it open. It was about continuing to grow, to build something that could last. And then there was the land, the small piece of property the old man had left him. The more Jack thought about it, the more he felt like it was his true calling, to do something lasting with that land. He had always felt out of place, like he didn't belong anywhere. But now, for the first time, he had a sense of purpose. One evening, after closing the bakery, Jack went out to the land. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving a warm, golden glow across the sky. Buddy trotted beside him, his tail wagging. The air was still, and the only sound was the soft crunch of Jack's boots on the earth. Jack had spent so much time working on the park, on the bakery, that he hadn't been to the land in weeks. As he walked across the field, he noticed the changes. The plants were growing taller, the soil was richer, and the air smelled fresher. The land was beginning to feel alive again. Jack knew that it would take time, effort, and patience to make it something truly great, but he was ready for the challenge. He stopped near the edge of the property, looking out at the trees that lined the far side. There was a feeling of quiet peace here, a peace that Jack hadn't known in a long time. He knew that this was where he belonged. As he stood there, lost in his thoughts, he heard footsteps approaching. He turned to see Sam walking toward him. Sam had been working alongside Jack on the land, and though he wasn't as quick to speak about his past, Jack knew that Sam had his own struggles to overcome. Still, there was something about Sam's quiet strength that made Jack feel like he wasn't alone. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind," Sam said, his voice steady as usual. Jack smiled faintly. "I guess I'm just thinking about everything. The bakery, the park, the land. I don't know if I'm ready to take on everything it's going to take." Sam nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I get it," he said quietly. "But you're not in this alone, Jack. You've got a whole town behind you. You've already built something here. And now it's time to build something even bigger." Jack looked at Sam, his heart heavy with the weight of responsibility. "But I don't know if I can keep up," Jack admitted. "I feel like I'm constantly running, constantly trying to do more. What if I can't handle it all?" Sam placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "You've already handled more than most people could ever dream of. You turned a bakery into a place of hope. You helped bring this town back to life. You've already proven you can handle whatever comes your way." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He had been so afraid of failing, of not being good enough. But Sam was right. Jack had already built something. He had already made a difference. And he could keep going. He just needed to believe in himself. The next day, Jack took action. He began planning for the future of the land, thinking about what he could grow, what he could build. He worked alongside the community, continuing to cultivate the park, and slowly started planting seeds on his property. It wasn't just about farming. It was about creating something that would bring people together, just like the bakery and the park had. As the weeks went on, Jack began to see the fruits of his labor. The land grew richer, the crops began to sprout, and more people came to the park, bringing their families, their friends, their hopes. Jack had created a place where people could gather, connect, and find solace. And for the first time in a long time, Jack realized that this was his purpose. It wasn't just about bread or land. It was about building something that would outlast him, something that would stand as a testament to the power of community, hope, and second chances. One afternoon, as Jack stood in the middle of the field, Looking out at the park and the land he had cultivated, he saw Mary walking toward him. She was holding her baby in her arms, smiling as she approached. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, her voice full of warmth. "You've done something amazing here, Jack. This town, it's come alive again. And I can't thank you enough for all the work you've done." Jack smiled, feeling a sense of pride wash over him. "It's not just me," he said quietly. "It's all of us. This town, this community, we're all in this together." Mary nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You've brought us together," she said, "and I think we're all better for it." Jack watched her walk away, the sound of her footsteps fading into the distance. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Jack stood still, his heart full. He had built something beautiful, and for the first time in his life, he knew that he had finally found his place in the world. I know that when you start to feel like things are falling into place, life has a way of testing you to see if you're truly ready for what's next. For Jack, the past few months had been a whirlwind of progress, hope, and growth. But as the park began to take shape, as the land started to yield crops, and as the community rallied around him, Jack could feel a new challenge on the horizon. One that he hadn't expected, but one that he couldn't ignore. The town of Pinewood, though smaller than most, had started to attract attention. Word of its revival, its transformation from a quiet, forgotten place into a thriving community, spread beyond the borders of the small town. Jack had always known this was possible. He had felt it in his heart from the moment he first stepped into the bakery, but he hadn't anticipated how much the attention would change things. One afternoon, as Jack was walking to the bakery, he saw a car parked in front of the building. It wasn't a car he recognized, and it looked like a professional vehicle, sleek, black, with tinted windows. Jack's curiosity got the better of him, and he quickened his pace. As he reached the door, the sound of conversation drifted through the open window. He could hear Maeve's voice, but it was more strained than usual. Stepping inside, Jack saw two men seated at the table. One was wearing a dark suit, and the other, a bit older, was dressed in a worn leather jacket. They both stood when Jack entered, and the man in the suit extended his hand. "You must be Jack," he said, his tone smooth and professional. "I'm Greg Mitchell, from Pinewood's Town Development Committee." Jack shook his hand, a bit confused. "Development Committee?" he repeated. "Yes," Greg replied. "We've been following the progress here, and we're impressed. You've done wonders for this town, and we believe Pinewood is ready for something bigger, something more." Jack felt a flutter of unease. "What do you mean?" he asked. The older man, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Pinewood's success has caught the attention of investors," he said, his voice gruff, but with a hint of excitement. "There's potential here. A lot of it. We're talking about expanding the town, building new businesses, new housing, making Pinewood a destination for tourists. And we want you to be a part of that." Jack's heart raced. He had worked so hard to create a space that felt authentic, a place where the community could thrive without losing its soul. "I'm not sure that's what Pinewood needs," Jack said carefully. "This town is about the people, not just making money or attracting tourists. I don't want it to lose its character." Greg smiled, though Jack could see the edge of frustration in his eyes. "That's what we're offering," Greg said. "We're not talking about changing Pinewood. We're talking about making it better. With the right investment, we could bring in more jobs, more businesses, more opportunities for everyone." The older man leaned forward. "And you, Jack, you're the key to making that happen. You've got the trust of the people here. If anyone can bring change without losing what's important, it's you." Jack felt the weight of their words sink in. He had built something good here, something that mattered. But could he really stand firm and protect it if everything started to change around him? He had already sacrificed so much, his sense of stability, his own doubts, his past. Could he risk it all for the future of the town? The tension in the room was thick, and for a long moment, Jack said nothing. He looked over at Maeve, who was standing behind the counter, watching him with a quiet, knowing gaze. She had seen him struggle through so much, and Jack knew she was waiting for him to make his decision. Finally, Jack broke the silence. "I need time to think," he said, his voice steady. "This is a big decision, and I can't make it on the spot." Greg nodded, though Jack could tell he wasn't pleased with the delay. "Of course, take your time," Greg said, standing up. "But just know that this is an opportunity you don't want to miss. We'll be in touch." As they left the bakery, Jack stood by the window, staring out at the empty street. The sound of the bell above the door faded, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a deep uncertainty. He had built something here, something real. But was he ready to let it grow into something bigger? And if he did, what would Pinewood become? That night, as Jack walked the land again, he couldn't shake the feeling that this decision was bigger than he could ever have imagined. The trees swayed in the breeze, and the earth beneath his feet felt solid, steady. For a moment, Jack wondered if it was already too late. Had the momentum of change already begun to take root? Buddy trotted ahead of him, stopping by the grove of trees at the edge of the property. Jack stopped beside him, looking up at the night sky. It was quiet here, peaceful. And for a moment, Jack let himself feel the weight of everything he had built, everything he had worked for. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing. He couldn't let go of what mattered. He couldn't let Pinewood become something it wasn't. Jack turned to Buddy, smiling softly. "Let's take our time, boy. We'll figure this out." And just like that, Jack knew that no matter what happened, he would protect the heart of Pinewood. He would find a way to balance progress with the soul of the town. I know that sometimes, when life seems to be moving forward, the past has a way of catching up to you, making you question everything you've built. Jack hadn't expected the visit from the development committee, and the weight of their proposal hung heavily on him. He stood at the edge of the park that was almost finished, looking out at the space that had brought so many people together. It had been his dream, his vision for Pinewood to thrive without losing what made it special. But now, with the town on the verge of changing, he found himself at a crossroads. The next morning, Jack woke up early, the sun just beginning to rise over Pinewood. The quiet hum of the morning felt different, heavier, like a moment before a storm. As he sat at the bakery, drinking his coffee and thinking, Buddy laid his head on Jack's lap, sensing the tension in his owner. Jack had always known there would be challenges, but the decision that lay before him felt bigger than any of those he had faced before. The phone call had come the night before. Greg from the development committee had asked him to meet them at the town hall to talk about the future of Pinewood. Jack hadn't agreed to anything yet, but the way the committee had spoken about the park, about the businesses they wanted to bring in, made it clear they saw Pinewood as a place to be shaped, to be changed into something more. But Jack wasn't sure if that's what he wanted. The town had started to thrive, yes, but it wasn't just the new businesses that had brought people together. It was the sense of community, the feeling of home that had been nurtured in the small moments at the bakery, in the park, and in the conversations between neighbors. Was that worth sacrificing? As Jack got up to leave the bakery, he felt a sense of urgency, but also of calm. He knew he had to talk to the people of Pinewood, the ones who had trusted him, the ones who had made the town feel like a real home. He needed their advice. It was the only way to make this decision. As he walked toward the town hall, he passed by the bakery's windows, the familiar sight of the park in the distance. The laughter of children, the conversations between friends. This was the heart of Pinewood. Jack paused, his thoughts racing. He had already built so much here. And now, it was about to change. The town hall was quiet when Jack arrived, the wood-paneled walls reflecting the warm light of the morning sun. The development committee was already there, sitting at a long table. Greg Mitchell was the first to stand when Jack walked in. "Glad you could make it, Jack," Greg said, offering a handshake. "We've got big plans for Pinewood, and we think you're the key to making them happen." Jack smiled politely, but said nothing. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to feel. "We've discussed it," Greg continued, "and we're confident that with the right investment, we can build a sustainable future for Pinewood. The park is a start, but there's so much more we can do." Jack nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. "So what exactly are you proposing?" Jack asked, his voice steady. Greg leaned forward. "We want to bring in new businesses, restaurants, shops, even a small hotel. We want Pinewood to become a place where tourists come, where people can visit for the weekend, enjoy the park, eat at local restaurants, and stay in a comfortable hotel. This isn't just about growth. It's about creating jobs and opportunities for everyone." Jack listened quietly, taking in the words. He had heard it all before. Towns like this being turned into tourist destinations, the charm and character stripped away in the name of progress. He had seen it happen in other places. But could Pinewood really survive that kind of change? Would it still be Pinewood, or would it become just another tourist trap? As the meeting went on, Jack's mind kept returning to the same thought. What was Pinewood really about? The people, the community, the spirit. It was more than just the businesses, the park, or the land. It was about the connections that had been made, the bonds that had been formed. He didn't want to lose that. After the meeting ended, Jack left the town hall, feeling heavier than when he had entered. He knew he had to make a decision, and he couldn't do it alone. The next day, he called a meeting with the people of Pinewood. He had to hear what they thought. He wasn't sure where to start, but he knew the only way forward was with the people he had been working alongside all this time. The bakery was full of people that morning. There was Mary, who had become a regular at the bakery, Henry, who had been Jack's first ally in town, and Maeve, who had supported him from the beginning. Jack looked around at their faces and took a deep breath. "I've been given an opportunity," he said slowly. "The town is about to change. There's talk of new businesses, new developments. But I'm not sure if that's what we want. I want to hear what you all think. This is your town too. What kind of future do we want for Pinewood?" The room fell silent. Jack could feel the weight of the question. Finally, Henry spoke up. "Jack, you've done more for this town than anyone else. You've brought us back to life. But the question isn't about what we want. It's about what Pinewood stands for. Do we want to be a place that's alive, with real people, real connections, or do we want to turn into something else?" Jack looked around the room, and in that moment, he knew. This wasn't just about businesses or tourists. It was about preserving what made Pinewood special. He smiled. "I think I know what we need to do," he said quietly. "We need to protect this place, this community. And together, we'll make sure it stays just like this." The people around him nodded, and Jack felt a sense of peace settle over him. They weren't just building a park, a bakery, or land. They were building a future, one where Pinewood could grow without losing the heart of what it truly was. I know that sometimes the hardest part of a journey isn't the work or the effort, but knowing when to let go, when to trust the process, and when to believe in the community you've built. Jack had spent months deciding what was right for Pinewood, and in the end, it wasn't about choosing progress or preservation. It was about finding a balance, one that would allow the town to grow, to thrive, while holding on to what made it special in the first place. As the final touches were put on the park, Jack stood at the edge, watching as children ran across the grass, their laughter echoing through the air. Families sat on the benches, talking and enjoying the warmth of the sun. It wasn't just a park anymore. It was a symbol of everything Pinewood had become, something vibrant, something alive. Jack felt a quiet pride as he watched the town come together. This wasn't the vision he had started with, but it was something better. This was the town, not just a place, but a community. As he stood there, Buddy at his side, Maeve walked up to him, a smile on her face. She had been with him every step of the way, offering advice, encouragement, and a steady presence. "You did it, Jack," she said softly, her voice full of warmth. "You brought them together. You made this happen." Jack looked at her, grateful for everything she had done. "We all did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This town, this community, it's not just about me. It's about all of us." Maeve nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "You know, Jack, I've been around a long time, and I've seen a lot of towns come and go. But Pinewood, it's different now. It's alive again. And it's because of you." Jack smiled, but the words felt heavy. He had never thought of himself as a hero. He had just been trying to do what felt right, to give people a place to call home. But maybe Maeve was right. Maybe this had all happened because of him, because he had chosen to stay, to fight for what mattered. That evening, after the park had closed and the last of the visitors had gone home, Jack sat outside the bakery, watching as the sun set over the hills. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the world felt still, peaceful. Buddy lay at his feet, content. Jack didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. Pinewood had a future. The town had a place, a purpose, and a community that would continue to grow long after he was gone. He wasn't just the owner of a bakery or a piece of land. He was part of something much bigger. He was part of a legacy. The wind shifted, and Jack could smell the earth, the freshly tilled soil of the land he had worked so hard to cultivate. He knew that this was just the beginning. There was still so much to do, so much to build, but for the first time, Jack felt ready. He wasn't running anymore. He wasn't hiding from his past or from the future. He was facing it head-on, with the people who had made it all possible. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Jack felt a sense of peace he had never known before. He had found his place in the world, and it was right here, in Pinewood. He didn't need anything more. The bakery, the park, the land, it was all part of the same story, the story of a town that had been brought back to life. And Jack was its heart. He smiled to himself, feeling the weight of the years lift off his shoulders. Whatever came next, he knew he was ready for it. He wasn't alone. He had a community, a family, and a home. And that was all he ever needed.